earlier 2025, I reported from Meililing, a village in southern China that is the modest hometown of DeepSeek founder Liang Wenfeng. As a student, he was a gifted and tireless coder. He is now China's AI hero. Liang's story is a reminder that the tech development boom in China is fueled by the individual choices of millions of engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs. In January 2025, the launch of DeepSeek's R1 model became a global flashpoint.
DeepSeek shaking up global tech.
NVIDIA losing nearly $600 billion in market cap today alone.
It is mind-blowing, and it is shaking this entire industry to its core. The emergence of DeepSeek now putting pressure on the U.S. tech names.
The fact that they were able to train an AI model for a fraction of the cost of what OpenAI and Google and Anthropic and all the other big AI players are spending.
The launch of DeepSeek's artificial intelligence model fundamentally changed China's global tech reputation and the narrative around Beijing's self-sufficiency. Let's look at the most vital element of this revolution, China's human capital. Has the glass ceiling narrative, which once drove top talent west, finally shattered?
This is the first episode of a three-part series after DeepSeek, a tech podcast from the South China Morning Post, and I am an AI-generated voice bringing a little digital soul to the conversation.
And I am your host, Coco Feng, the Post's senior tech reporter.
I started to study AI since 20 years ago, so I have a very long experience in this area.
That is Zheng Zeyu. I've called him up to discuss the role of Chinese talent in the country's tech rise.
Zeyu is the founder of AI fashion tracker Zhui Tech, based in Hangzhou. He studied and worked in America before making the decision to bring his expertise home.
I graduated from Peking University. After that, I went to Carnegie Mellon University for a master's degree. I worked for Google for 3 years. Around 2015, I decided to join a startup to use AI algorithm to solve some industrial problem in China. So at that time, I co-founded my first startup company in Hangzhou.
I have also contacted Mehran Gul, a writer and expert who thinks and writes about technology and business.
Part of Mehran's new book, The New Geography of Innovation, unpacks how China's advancement in areas like AI is being driven by its human capital.
You said in your book that China is, quote, the only competitor against the US. What role do you think China's talent has played in that development?
I think the role of talent has really been one of the most decisive factors in China's rapid advancement in not just artificial intelligence, but also some of the other niches in which we see it playing a big role in the tech economy, like, for instance, in EVs or solar, for instance. China just has, one of the biggest talent pipelines in the world. And unlike, say, the US, the university focus in China tends to be very heavily focused on subjects like engineering, computer science, mathematics, and that really has a downstream impact on the country's ability to develop sort of advanced AI systems. But it's not just the talent pipeline domestically, for instance. I think now we're seeing a lot of high-profile academics returning to China. We saw recently the return of Sun Nan, for instance, who had a PhD from Harvard, who is a world-renowned authority on AI semiconductor chips, who came back to Tsinghua University, for instance. In my book, I talk about Yaxin Zhang, who leads the AI industry research lab at Tsinghua, who previously had worked for over 2 decades at Microsoft. So I see talent, both the one that China has managed to retain and the talent that is increasingly going back to China from prominent positions abroad, as being one of the most decisive factors in its development of the AI industry.
Another expert we spoke with points out that most of the returnees are not necessarily the highest-level researchers.
Dr. David Zweig is a Canadian academic scientist and China expert who has been studying U.S.-China talent flows for over 50 years. His latest book is called The War for Chinese Talent in America. Dr. Zweig is currently working on a book about reverse migration.
academics, scientists, people looking for jobs. So you're looking more at the high-level people you were talking about. I've done a lot of work now recently on people who just went out and got a master's degree, because actually the majority of people, when the Chinese report that, 85% of people go out and come back, those are mostly master students. The data on high-level people, the last thing we've seen was that 83% were not coming back.
83, that is still a large proportion.
Huge, but it used to be in the year 2000 was 99%. So the trend is definitely has been improving in favor of China.
So, Zeyu, you studied in the US. The American dream was for a long time the ultimate goal for top Chinese students like you. So, what drew you back to Hangzhou to start Zhiyi Tech?
Yes, right. So actually, it's because of the opportunity in China. At that time, I think US may have a lot of opportunities, but it's hard for a Chinese student to start a startup. Not impossible, but for me, I think it's not quite easy to do that. But in China, it's a starting age of AI.
When you say it's hard for you personally to start a company in the US, was that purely logistical, or did you feel what many call a glass ceiling for Chinese national working in Silicon Valley?
Mostly, I think it's a culture gap. The US guys are very nice, that's sure. But if you are doing a startup, you need to lead a culture, then that might be hard for a Chinese guy to do that. Not impossible, but it's hard.
So the cultural gap in the US was a factor, but you said the opportunity in China was also a draw. You chose to focus on the traditional fashion industry using AI to help with design and trend tracking. What made that an attractive opportunity?
There are more traditional industries in China, so there are better opportunities. But if you are working on the technology itself, the US is still the best place to be. But if you are using AI to help traditional industry to improve, then I think China is the best place to be.
For many engineers and entrepreneurs alike, applying AI to traditional Chinese manufacturing and commerce seems to have created a big domestic opportunity.
I got a sense talking to many of the people that they thought that they could build faster in China, for instance. Decisions are made much more quickly, and they thought that their ideas could make much more impact in that sort of fast-paced environment. And also, I think people had the sense that in China, the opportunities were bigger than sort of their age, where Chinese labs would entrust them with a much higher level of responsibility, like having larger research teams, for instance, something that in order to reach a similar level of influence in the US, they would have had to wait just a lot longer. At least I, in more than a few conversations, got a sense of the sense of patriotism or a sense of mission, which one sort of very prominent Chinese researcher described to me as almost a civilizational pride that China is investing very heavily in future technologies.
Beijing has played a clear role through its talent policies and government support in general. Many listeners will know the high-profile state programs, such as the 1,000 Talents Plan, which has now phased out.
China's 1,000 Talents Plan was launched in 2008 and ran for over a decade. It was aimed at recruiting overseas experts, but with mixed results, one may say.
On the one hand, China went way over the top in trying to get that information from Chinese scholars in the United States. And it put those scholars in a very difficult situation, right? I mean, they're confronted, do you love your country, right? And if you do and you do this, do it secretly. Well, if you do it secretly and you get caught, you're going to get in trouble, right? And so the United States then went overboard in its suspicions about who was doing this, how much was being transferred. The U.S. government put pressure on the FBI to find people in the fall of 2019. Once you get the China initiative, then there's enormous pressure. And it becomes a kind of American campaign to put pressure on the U.S. intelligence service and police and Justice Department to find people. And so they made mistakes. They reported people that hadn't done anything wrong. That created a terrible backlash, right? So you get all of the stories of people being accused of things that they never did, or they never should have been treated as badly as they were treated. And so people left the country, world-class scholars. It's a two-way street. It's a terrible phenomenon that happened because the outcome is the lack of collaboration, collaborative research. There is no collaboration across the Pacific anymore.
Going back to the brain gain phenomenon, what is the primary incentive beyond patriotism or salary that is successfully attracting top tier Chinese scientists and researchers to return from the West?
I think now the projects are bigger because China is spending more money and they're doing bigger stuff. And so in that sense, I think that's an invitation. That's really attractive. That you can go from being, running a 10-person laboratory or a research team in the UK or in the US, and then all of a sudden go back and become the director of some kind of major project, right, with enormous prestige. You may get to meet Xi Jinping. You'll definitely get to meet the Minister of Science and that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that's the strategy that China's using now. And that's where the real challenge is to the United States, because these are cutting edge fields.
Large state-sponsored projects seem to be a pull for top scientific talent. But to what extent is China's AI ecosystem state-driven?
I do think that this entire idea that China's AI ecosystem is state-driven tends to be a bit overstated in the sense that, on both ends, in the sense that I think other countries also have a lot of state support for their tech companies. SpaceX in its initial years was entirely funded by government dollars. If you even go back and look at the beginning, the origins of Silicon Valley, which I discussed in my book, those origins can almost entirely be traced back to state funding in the post-World War II era, specifically defense funding that flowed to places like Stanford. So I think in that respect, China is maybe not as different from the US as maybe sometimes we are led to believe. I in the tech economy, at least, I don't see China as being a command economy model. I see it more as a strategic acceleration model where the government builds momentum and then the market multiplies it. If you look at the tech economy, that is overwhelmingly private sector. All the major advancements in AI would be happening in Alibaba or Baidu or ByteDance or SenseTime. I don't really see the involvement of the state to the extent that maybe sometimes is talked about outside of China.
A critical mass of talent, both talent that returned and never left, coupled with the drive of nostalgia, strong market opportunities, and state acceleration, laid the groundwork for a major shift. The breakthrough success of DeepSeek is the clearest evidence yet, decisively moving Chinese AI past its copycat reputation. DeepSeek signifies that China is now pursuing an original path of development and has its own distinct future, rather than just playing catch-up with global leaders like OpenAI and Anthropic. Mehran, was DeepSeek the moment that the world's understanding finally caught up with China's reality in fundamental AI research?
So one thing that I often say is that the world's perceptions of China tend to lag reality by about 5 years. So wherever you think China is right now, that's where it was 5 years ago. People get surprised by what's happening in solar. The most prominent research paper in computer science, the most cited research paper in any academic field in the world, called ResNet, which comes from the MSRA lab in Beijing. That really gives you a sense that the fundamental research breakthroughs are happening in China as well.
ResNet is short for Residual Network. It is a paper from the Microsoft Research Asia Lab in Beijing about skipped connections, which solved the key problem of training ultra-deep neural networks. This simpler architectural innovation is fundamental to modern AI.
The world pours money into the US tech sector. Does the success of a company like DeepSeek, despite its relatively lower valuation, suggest that traditional metrics like massive funding rounds and high valuations are potentially misleading indicators of a company's ability to be innovative and disruptive?
People used to think that you need to have billions of dollars in order to compete in frontier disciplines. And the fact that DeepSeek could do it at a fraction of the cost, does this have implications beyond AI as well? Company valuations are an indication of past performance, not of future performance. What DeepSeek shows is that we cannot simply look at the headline number of money raised and valuations achieved in order to make any conclusions about which companies are going to be more innovative or more productive or more competitive.
Hi. Let's talk about one of the locations that embodies the new era in tech talent retention in China, Hangzhou. It is the home of DeepSeek, and it is where Zeyu chose to base Zhi Tech. Zeyu, you mentioned Hangzhou was very open to tech startups. What does that look like on the ground?
Hangzhou is very friendly to new startups, especially for new tech startups. And also Hangzhou have very nice university which can provide a lot of talented person for us to hire. So Hangzhou government funded us like more than 10 million Chinese yuan and provided a lot of policy to help us to grow faster.
10 million yuan is about 1.4 million US dollars, which is substantial support. Now that DeepSeek has given Hangzhou City global visibility, how has that popularity helped your own business?
Hangzhou definitely draw extremely a lot of attention after DeepSeek releases its version. So and that helped us a lot because before DeepSeek released its AI model, a lot of people is very skeptical about whether AI can make a difference in the area. But after DeepSeek released, people's attitudes to AI is changed dramatically.
Zeyu highlights the financial incentives and local government support in Hangzhou. Professor Zweig, however, provides a counterpoint on the non-financial institutional challenges.
If you go back and you set up a company, you may have to put Communist Party members on your board, right? That's now a rule. If you've lived in the United States for 10, 15 years and you like freedom, that's not such an inviting environment, right?
But this rule only applies to big internet firms. We know Beijing has been investing a lot in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or so-called STEM education.
It graduates one of the largest cohorts of STEM graduates every year.
And remember, I went to the hometown of DeepSeek founder Liang Wenfeng. That's where he scored the highest at his school during the 2002 National College Entrance Exam, the most important exam for all Chinese students. He then went to the prestigious Zhejiang University in Hangzhou, and that changed everything. By investing heavily in STEM over 2 decades, China has created a national talent base of such depth and quality that it can now solve hardware limitations through software and algorithmic efficiency. The result is more resilience, self-sufficiency, and innovation powered by domestic human capital.
Some say that China is now spending more on R&D than the United States. So maybe you need, the top people and maybe 5, 6, 7 other top people to make a company successful. And then the rest can be people who have got a master's degree in STEM. So what's probably now happening that may not have been happening before is maybe China can put together those teams of a chief technical officer and 5, 6, 7 other people who can form a team to then go out and carry out a project. Some of them will be returnees and some of them won't be. Some of them will just be smart kids who, people who stayed and went to a really top. China's got some pretty good universities. If you look at the increase in publications and ranking, the international status of universities, you've got some really, really, really good universities that have come up. And I think that's a big factor in this.
The backdrop to all of this is scale. China produces one of the largest cohorts of STEM graduates every year. In fact, it is estimated that the country's universities educated more than 12 million graduates in 2025, all of whom were about to enter the challenging job market. For more on this, listen to our award-winning podcast series, Inside China's Demographic Revolution. That brings me to the end of this After DeepSeek episode. Next time, we'll look at the new rules of the AI development game in this era. Tech editor Zhou Xin will speak with Professor Yang Hongxia, a top-tier researcher with deep experience in both the US and China, and Kyle Chen, a heavyweight in the study of China's tech and industrial policy.
This was part 1 of a new South China Morning Post podcast series. For more reporting on the tech revolution in China, visit our website at cmp.com.
And please subscribe to this podcast series wherever you get your podcasts.